12,000 years ago, before the first brick was ever laid in Jericho, before wheat was ever sown in a field, before anyone on earth had learned to write a single word, someone stood on this hill and decided to build a temple. Not a hut, not a grave, a temple. Deliberately arranged rings of towering limestone pillars, carved with foxes, scorpions, vultures and boars, some standing over 5 meters tall and weighing as much as 16 tons. There was no city here, no agriculture, no draft animals to haul the stone. According to almost everything archaeologists believed about how civilization began, a monument like this should not have been possible for another 6,000 years. And yet, here it is. This is the story of Göbekli Tepe and of the hill that quietly rewrote the beginning of human history. In 1963, a joint American and Turkish survey team walked across this hill in the Şanlıurfa province of Turkey. They noted a scatter of broken limestone slabs poking up through the soil and assumed, reasonably, that they were looking at an abandoned medieval cemetery. They wrote it down, moved on, and the hill went back to being farmland for another 30 years. In 1994, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt was working through old survey reports from the region when the description of that hill stopped him. Something about the way the stones had been described didn't sit right. He decided to see it for himself. Local farmers had long called the mound Göbekli Tepe, Potbelly Hill, because of its gently rounded shape. For centuries, they had been dragging their plows over it, occasionally striking stone, occasionally cursing at a slab too large to move, with no idea what lay beneath their feet. Schmidt climbed the hill, looked at the same broken limestone the earlier survey team had dismissed, and immediately understood he was not looking at a graveyard. He was looking at the tip of something enormous. Later, geophysical surveys would reveal at least 20 separate stone enclosures buried beneath the hill, arranged in rings, most of them still untouched. Excavation began in 1995. It has not stopped since. To understand why Göbekli Tepe matters, you have to understand what the world looked like 11,500 years ago. There were no cities anywhere on Earth, no writing, no pottery, in this region at least. No domesticated wheat, no domesticated cattle. The people who lived across this part of Anatolia were still hunter-gatherers, small, mobile bands following gazelle herds and wild grain across the seasonal landscape, exactly as humans had done for tens of thousands of years before them. The prevailing model of history, built up over more than a century of archaeology, went something like this. Humans settled down, then farmed, then built villages, then built shrines. Religion, in this model, was a byproduct of stability, something that emerged once people had the surplus time and food to think about anything beyond survival. Göbekli Tepe breaks that sequence entirely, because the people who raised these pillars were not farmers. Animal bone deposits found at the site are almost entirely from wild game: gazelle, wild boar, deer. The stone tools show no trace of harvesting domesticated grain. Radiocarbon dating places the earliest construction phases around 9,600 BCE, a full 2,000 years before the earliest confirmed evidence of farming anywhere in the region. Which raises an uncomfortable question for 100 years of settled theory. What if the temple came first? What if it wasn't food surplus that brought people together to build something sacred, but the other way around? What if the gathering itself, drawn together by belief, is what eventually pushed people toward farming, simply to feed the crowds that kept returning? Schmidt himself put it more bluntly in his own way. First came the temple, then came the city. Walk into one of the excavated enclosures at Göbekli Tepe, and the first thing you notice is the shape. 2 massive central pillars, each carved in the rough form of a T, rise from the enclosure's floor, surrounded by a ring of smaller pillars, connected by low stone walls. Look closer, and the pillars stop looking like architecture and start looking like people. Several of the central stones have arms carved in low relief along their sides, hands meeting at the front where a belt and loincloth are carved into the stone. These are not columns, they are bodies, abstracted, faceless, monumental bodies, standing in circles, facing inward. And covering them, an entire bestiary. Foxes mid-stride, scorpions with raised tails, vultures with wings spread wide, wild boars, snakes coiling up the pillar's edge, and on one particularly striking stone, a vulture appearing to hold a human skull beneath its wing. Nobody knows with certainty what any of it means. Some archaeologists read the vulture and skull imagery as evidence of a sky burial practice, the dead left exposed for birds to carry into the next world, the vulture acting as psychopomp. Others see the animals as totems, symbols standing in for clans or ancestral spirits gathered together at a shared meeting ground. What almost everyone agrees on is this: raising these pillars took extraordinary coordination. Some of the limestone blocks were quarried, shaped, carved, and dragged several hundred meters from the extraction site, without wheels, without draft animals, without metal tools. That kind of labor doesn't happen by accident, and it doesn't happen for one family or even one village. It requires large numbers of people from different groups agreeing to come together, cooperate, and commit months of collective effort to something with no practical use at all. No use, that is, except belief. Here is the detail that makes Göbekli Tepe stranger still. At some point, the people who used these enclosures didn't abandon them and let them fall into ruin the way most ancient sites decay. They buried them, deliberately, backfilling entire enclosures with rubble, broken tools and animal bone, layer by layer, until the pillars vanished beneath the hill, the same hill a survey team would walk over, unknowing, 4,000 years later. Nobody knows why. One theory holds that each enclosure had a working lifespan, and once its purpose was served, perhaps generations later, it was ceremonially closed and a new one built nearby, an act of renewal rather than abandonment. Another theory suggests the backfilling preserved what little we have today almost by accident, protecting delicate carvings from thousands of years of weather that would otherwise have erased them entirely. Whatever the reason, that burial is arguably the reason Göbekli Tepe survived at all, a monument hidden so well, so early, that it waited 11,500 years for anyone to notice it was there. Only a small fraction of Göbekli Tepe has been excavated. Geophysical surveys suggest at least 16 more enclosures remain buried beneath the surrounding hill, untouched, waiting. What's already been uncovered has been enough to force a rewrite of the opening chapter of civilization. For a long time, the story went, humans farmed, then settled, then built something to believe in. Göbekli Tepe suggests it may have happened in something closer to the reverse, that shared belief and the will to build something greater than any one person may be one of the oldest forces that ever pulled scattered human beings into a single, cooperating group. 6,000 years before Stonehenge, 7,000 years before the pyramids, before the wheel, before the plough, before a single word was ever written down, someone looked at a hilltop in southeastern Turkey and decided it was worth carving stone, worth gathering strangers, worth building something that would outlast them. They buried it. The desert covered it, and it waited, patiently, for 11,600 years for someone to remember it was there.